Hello and happy Tuesday. I hope you're all doing well and having a fantastic week so far. This is a live premiere on YouTube, so welcome and thank you for joining me. If you're watching or listening to this later and you're wondering how to catch this live, the easiest way to catch our live streams is to go to colememo.com/YouTube. Once again, that's COLEMEMO.com/YOUTUBE. Make sure to subscribe when you get there so that you never miss a stream. This podcast is also available on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and other podcasting platforms. A few months ago, I traveled to Decatur, Illinois to meet with Representative Dan Caulkins before his term as an elected official ended. I originally released this interview early to members at colememo.com/Patreon. For just $3 a month, you can get early access to episodes before they go public. Once again, that's at colememo.com/Patreon, colememo.com/Patreon. And just a quick heads up, if you're on an Apple device, I recommend signing up from a computer or just a non-Apple device because Apple adds extra fees on top of what I feel is my very fair price of $3 a month, which of course is a typical big tech move. All episodes eventually release for free on public feeds, but again, if you'd like to support the show and get episodes early, head to colememo.com/Patreon. And since this episode was recorded a few months back, it probably goes without saying, but some of what we discussed might have shifted or changed since our discussion. I always encourage media literacy, and by that I mean double check anything we mention, stay curious, question everything you consume, including this podcast. For added context, I'll be adding some headlines during the stream, or I'll be displaying some headlines during the stream, and you can also find additional resources and links in the show notes, which should be below this YouTube video or within the description of the episode that you're listening to now on whichever platform you're listening from. So, producing this show is not cheap. Between the licensing fees, travel, equipment, and more, it all adds up. This show is powered by listeners like you. If Patreon's not your thing, you can make a one-time, yearly, or monthly contribution at colememo.com/support. And if you can't support financially, no worries. One of the best ways to help support this show is by smashing that like button, as the kids say. Yeah, hit the like button. I know it sounds like a small thing, but it helps to put this show in front of more viewers, and that's a big deal. So I would accept all of your support. You could also share the show or leave a positive review from wherever you're listening from. If you can go on over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give me a 5-star review, I would give you a hug and maybe even a joint if you send me a screenshot. I just want to say thanks again for being here, and folks, I really hope that you enjoy this episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching The Cole Memo.
Well, Representative Caulkins, this is how we do it. Thank you for sitting down with me today. Nice to meet you again.
Good to see you again. Been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. What was it, the last session? Now we're in veto. Just so that people know, today is November 18th, 2024. Where did the year go? But before we get into it, I want to give you the space to introduce yourself to my audience and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, obviously, I'm Dan Caulkins. I represent the 88th House District. I'm in the end of my third and final term. And when I ran 7 years ago, I promised our constituents that I would only serve 3 terms if they would continue to elect me. And I'm very fortunate that I have been reelected twice. So, but my term ends in January, so it's 6 years in the House, which has been a really great experience. And really the highlights of the time are here in this office, and the ability to help people and help folks navigate the government and the government system.
Mm-hmm.
The constituent services, particularly during COVID, we spent a lot of time in here, helping people.
Yeah.
So, raised in Decatur. My wife just been married 50 years a couple of months ago.
Congrats.
Thank you. Went to public schools here, went to Eastern Illinois University, spent 3 years on active duty in the Army, about 5 years in the reserves, and 15 years almost in the Illinois Army National Guard.
Thank you for your service.
I enjoyed it, every bit of it. I have to say I'm very fortunate. I got stationed in Germany for 2 years, and the rest of the time I've spent here in the United States.
Nice. And we are in the 88th district?
88th House District.
Where's
Decatur, to Bloomington. It goes over to Piatt County, which is where Monticello is,
mm-hmm.
and takes in half of DeWitt County, which is where Clinton is. When they redrew the map,
I was going to ask about that.
They carved up our House District pretty significantly, increased our presence in McLean County. So the 88th District has it has the largest land mass of the House districts in McLean County. So we go around Bloomington Normal, and then off everything east all the way to Champaign County. So a lot of McLean County and small towns, rural community, and it's really a great House district.
Yeah, and I did a little bit of reading. I don't know if this is the correct term, but you used to be in assisted living. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How did you find yourself as a representative? Is it something you'd always wanted to do, or?
Well, I got into assisted living. We built a group home for developmentally disabled adults. My partner and I did in Sullivan in the early 1990s. And so I ran those homes, and my partner and I, we ended up 6 different facilities in central Illinois, none in Decatur.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a way, I guess it's something inside me, is to help people and to give back. Then my brother and I built an assisted living facility up in West Chicago in DuPage County.
Oh, cool.
And he and his wife now own it and run it.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of combined 2 questions. How do you get from being in that to, when did you start considering running for public office?
Well, I ran for the Decatur City Council.
Okay.
I've been involved in politics since college, going back into the 70s.
Okay.
And I actually ended up in the White House with President Nixon.
Oh, wow.
Reauthorizing a GI Bill. And I was just an interest in public service and politics after I got out of the Army. I came back to Decatur in 1979, got involved with State Rep Dwayne Nolan and Bill Mitchell and Senator Nolan then, and Senator Frank Watson. And just a natural fit to want to be involved and help people. And I was helping people run their campaigns and knocking on doors and fundraising and doing things. And I thought one day, I said, you've helped all these other people and you've done all this stuff and you're telling other people how to run their campaigns, but I'd never done anything myself. So I said, well, let's run for city council.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ran for city council and had a good run, won our seat on the city council. And 4 years later, I decided I'd run again. And I got unelected. So I've won and lost, but I putting my theories to work and things that I would helping other people do. I wanted to make sure that they actually did work and work for me. So after I got out of the city council, it opened up some other doors. I worked hard with a fellow named Bobby Schilling, ran for Congress, and we unseated an incumbent Democrat in a congressional race. Was involved in helping Bruce Rauner get through a Republican primary, and won his race for governor. And I wasn't quite so successful the second time. I think it wasn't all my fault.
A lot of money flying around.
Yeah. So all of that. And my state rep is a friend of mine, our former state rep here, Bill Mitchell. I was a longtime friend of mine, and I'd helped him, and I was his treasurer at one time. And when he finally decided that it was time to retire, I thought, well, maybe it's my time to serve. So 7 years ago, he announced his retirement, and I announced my candidacy, and we ran a primary, and I won the primary, and here we sit.
7 years ago. So
Yeah.
not quite the political machine we're living in today, where there's the, social media and all that.
We had
And
social media. I mean, we did.
it was the
things.
beginning of it, right?
Yeah, in the very beginning.
Yeah.
The guys that's in the next office over, the owner of it's a golf national golf tournament, amateur golf tournament, Matt Bender, came on board after my first election, and has been my social media kind of guy that helps put out my Facebook posts and Instagram, and I don't know, X now it's called.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so we got involved in that, and that's kind of been a place where we reach people. I also use an organization called Cirrus, SURUS, and they do what was called Nation Builder.
Oh.
So we have our nation is our House district, and every week we try to put out a newsletter to let people in our district know, what we're doing and what's going on in Springfield and what's coming up. So we communicate both on Facebook and through email through Nation Builder.
Yeah. What's it been like as a representative in the state of Illinois?
Well, being in a super minority isn't fun.
Sure.
We're essentially ignored in Springfield. Come up with good ideas and good bills. I had a bill I put together to increase resource officers in school and do some things. And the Democrats liked it so much, they took my bill and cut it into 4 pieces and handed it out to 4 different Democrat reps and passed it. And I go, okay, I mean, that's fine. I'm not in it.
Yeah.
I don't, nobody's ever going to remember that I passed this bill or did that.
Sure.
Bill. I think what they'll remember is what Missy Wooters and I have done here, for our constituents.
And, again, before we get to the bigger picture topics, maybe for folks that are tuning in and aren't familiar with Illinois politics, can you just, again, we'll probably be talking about it a lot through the topics we are going to discuss today, but can you just explain the fact that Illinois is a majority Democrat-led state?
Well, Illinois is the General Assembly and our congressional district, and obviously our 2 senators, and every statewide office is held by Democrats. That may be changing after the last election. We've seen some trends that I think are encouraging. The difficult part is that every 10 years after the census, the maps get redrawn, and the majority party draws the maps. And so for the last 30, 40 years, the Democrats have drawn the map, and they have drawn the map such that they protect their incumbents and expand their base of power. If you look at Illinois county by county or precinct by precinct, Illinois is red. We are a red state. It just happens that the majority of the population is centered in the Cook County, DuPage County, up in the Collier counties. It's where the majority of the population of the state is. And metropolitan areas all over the country tend to be controlled by Democrats. I have a kind of an interesting theory about that. And that is that when you get into an area where people are stacked on top of each other and crammed together, they have to rely on the government to pick up the trash, to clean the streets, to, provide the parks and recreation, to direct traffic and to run things. So when they become when you start to look to government for solutions to your social problems and to your, I guess, well-being, you tend to be a Democrat because that's how, I guess, their mantra. I mean, that's what they do. They think that the government should tell us how to live our lives, as opposed to conservatives, Republicans. We feel that everyone should live their life, and the government shouldn't interfere as little as possible.
Right.
So, when you grow up in that environment and you live in that environment and you look at government as a big brother, naturally, I think when you go to Springfield, you want to enhance the power of government. I don't think it's right, and I think it's proven not to be a very good solution.
Yeah.
But I think that's why, these compacted areas, heavily populated areas, are Democratic.
I just felt it was important to kind of give people what you meant. Like it feels maybe sometimes that you're fighting an uphill battle.
Well, no, it's not uphill. It's up a cliff. I mean, we're trying to scale a cliff every day in Springfield. There's 78 Democrats and 40 Republicans in the House. It only takes 60 votes to pass anything.
Yeah.
So they have 78 members, and they only need 60 of them to vote on something. They don't even need us to show up to have a quorum. And so it's a very difficult.
What's the makeup? Sorry to pop quiz you. What's the makeup of the Senate in Illinois?
It's the same
It's
ratio.
The same.
I mean, there's a supermajority in the Senate as well.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, there's a lot that we can get into. I feel like my big picture, the big ticket item that we'll be discussing today is PICA. But I wanted to give you the space to talk about a few different issues that have come up, Rivian layoffs and the Goshen plant in Mantino. Why don't we start off with that and maybe segue to mobile ID?
Sure.
Floor is yours. I just want people to know
let's
that.
Talk about,
yeah.
Let's talk about CEJA, the new Green Deal, Illinois' new Green Deal, and that's where it all comes from, and why you see windmills and solar panels everywhere. We have a governor and obviously a General Assembly who thinks that wind and solar are the answer to climate change, and Illinois is going to save the world. And so we're shutting down our coal plants and gas-fired plants, and promoting and paying for these windmills and solar panels to be put up, incentives. So part of that, I guess, mindset philosophy goes to these electric powered vehicles, EVs. And now we have a mandate that, by 2035, we're going to have 1 million electric cars on the road. And by 2050 will be, all the gas powered vehicles will be off the road, will be completely electric. And it's not working out so well. Yeah. So one of the big employers in our area, it's not in my district, but it's adjacent to it. Rivian is making EVs, and they're nice, they're reliable, but the demand is not there. The other part of the problem, and from what I understand, is the supply chain. They're having problems getting parts to actually assemble these cars and trucks and delivery vans. So that supply chain plus the lack of demand, or at least diminished demand, has led to people not having work. I mean, you go to work a day or two a week, just doesn't pay your bills. And it certainly is, I think, a real problem. But the governor's hung his hat on Rivian, one of the big projects, and we've been going to invest, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars in direct incentives and tax incentives for that plant to remain operational. I just don't know how they're going to meet their matrix when they are not producing. They're not running that line, every day, more than one shift.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these incentives are based on employment. And I don't know what's going to happen. The other thing is we get into, I think, is Stellantis. The Belvedere plant that was going to be making batteries and electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, Stellantis is, went through all of the negotiations and got all the deals, and we're going to reopen the plant, and we're going to make electric cars and build batteries and employ all these thousands of people again. And the market's not there.
Mm-hmm.
So are we ahead of it? And this is kind of a marketing, you can pull or you can push.
Right.
And right now we're pushing and people are resistant.
Yeah.
So that plant, the timeline has now been pushed back almost 2 years to open that plant. And all those people that negotiated that deal thought that plant would be open this spring, or, they would start coming back to work.
Yeah.
And
they named a road after it.
Yeah. And it's not going to happen. And I don't think it's going to happen for quite a long time, if it ever happens, which then takes us down the road to Manteno and the Goshen plant. So there's 2 Goshen plants in the United States, one in Michigan and one in Illinois.
What is Goshen?
Goshen is the name of a company that owns, that is the company that's going to be making these batteries.
Gotcha.
So part of the process happens in Michigan and part of the process happens in Manteno. Well, we've given them $125 million cash to get this project up and running. They're promising 2,900, almost 3,000 jobs when that plant's fully operational. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, it's my own opinion. I don't think it's going to happen. There's no market for these batteries. The battery technology is continuing to change. And so I think we're way ahead of ourselves on this project.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin on that is that it's a Chinese-owned company. And the Congress is looking at these Chinese companies that are coming in and taking over industries.
Right.
And what kind of a threat does that pose to our national security?
Mm-hmm.
The fear is that Chinese company will come in and start building batteries and undercut any American company that wants to start a battery plant and essentially own the market. Well, now you have a foreign entity that owns the battery market in the United States. Is that really, do you want the Chinese government involved in our economy to that extent?
Right.
We're trying to get out of China.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to get our manufacturing, our drugs. We're trying to get things made in America again. So do you let the Chinese come and set up shop here and then use their predatory practices to control a market?
Right.
And so there's some national security implications with that plan as well.
Yeah.
The company.
Yeah. I mean, well, I'm just thinking, I'm racking my brain right now. There's a phone that's made in China that we've banned. We don't allow it to be sold here because of not even concerns about undercutting prices, but like national security concerns, like people, the Chinese government having access to information we put through our phones. Not that
phone. Yeah, they're actually. Oh yeah, no, they're listening to it.
Well, I was going to say, the American government has probably same, if not better, access. But the point I'm trying to make is, if we have concerns about taking phones from the Chinese government, what about driving cars from the Chinese government?
I mean,
So I looked it up, and the phone that I believe I was thinking of is Huawei, spelled Huawei. The United States banned the sale of these phones amid security fears. You can also look up the United States, I believe, as early as this fall, was looking to ban the sale of drones and equipment and even features, I believe, on certain equipment from a company called DJI, which is a Chinese-owned company. And so, these are just a few different examples in which the United States is banning the sale of certain items from China due to security concerns. And so this is what I was referencing. I'll keep it brief and send you right back into the episode. I hope you're enjoying it so far.
Yeah.
Driving cars.
Right.
Chinese.
Well, I mean, if they want to shut the batteries off,
That's what I
put
mean,
these
yeah.
batteries in trucks and cars or government vehicles, and they decide they've got some backdoor app stored in that battery, and they can just go online and shut those batteries off. What are you going to do? I mean, there's a lot of things that we don't think about as ordinary, everyday people. Fortunately, there are folks, in this country that do think that far in advance and think about those things. So you talk about your phone. There is a phone that's a secure phone that the government uses.
Yeah.
And this guy was telling a story. He worked for the CIA, and they were using these phones, and they had charging cords. And one day somebody said, where are we getting our charging cords? I said, I don't know. It's a supplier. And the charging cord looked a little funny. So they x-rayed the charging cord, and they found malware. They found malware in the charging cord to these secure phones that was able to intercept what was going on that phone and sending it back out through the internet.
That's insane.
Somebody had sabotaged the charging cords that the government had placed an order for.
That's crazy.
Spy versus spy.
Exactly.
But, who would x-ray a charging cord?
Right.
CIA did.
Yeah.
Somebody said, this is kind of lumpy and it doesn't bend well. Wonder what's inside here.
Yeah. So any other, you bringing up that cable thing brings up thoughts about mobile ID, but any other thoughts about just that topic in general, Rivian, you just brought up the batteries being produced by...
I think what's happened, and there was just an article in Cranes this week. In fact, was it this week or over the weekend? It talked about Illinois and the growth of corporations, people that are coming and setting up business here and whatnot. And Rivian Goshen was one of the favored or highlighted companies, and these 2,900 jobs that are going to be created catapults Illinois up to like 23rd on the list of the top 50 states. But yet none of those jobs have been created. It's all wishful thinking. And you're using government is using these numbers and these deals to inflate their effectiveness. And so people say, oh, well, Illinois is doing great. We've moved up, from 33rd to 23rd and all the things that are, but until you admit that you have a problem, until you actually admit that your policies, your tax policies, your business policies on taxing and regulating business are failure, we're never going to correct what, the spiral that we're in.
Yeah.
We lost one congressional seat, in 2020. We'll probably lose another congressional seat in 2030. Illinois' influence has dwindled significantly, over the last 3-4 decades, because we continue to focus on social issues, feel-good issues, political issues, rather than attracting and keeping and promoting, growth and businesses.
Yeah.
The cost of doing business in Illinois is astronomical. Workman's comp is like twice as high as it is in Indiana. The insurance, unemployment insurance is high in Illinois. Then you take the property taxes, and then you go from there, you go to your utility bills.
Right.
And when companies are looking, where to locate, they're considering the costs of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can bribe them for a while, which is what we do. We bribe people to come here and do business.
Yep.
But when that bribe ends, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Rivian took their battery plant and didn't put it in Illinois.
Right.
I mean, it goes on and on, people that have left.
I think one thing you said that really made sense, it really resonated with me, is that, we can push these feel-good policies all day, but if there's not demand for those vehicles, what are we doing? And to your...
Yeah, it's an agenda.
Yeah.
And it's an ideology. It's not based in reality of economics.
It probably would feel good to say Illinois has produced the most electric vehicles, even though it's like...
Right. And then you ask them, how many is that? Well, 100? No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
Well, but I mean, even Ford, who went to an electric pickup truck, they stopped production of the electric pickup truck, for at least a year. Nobody buys them.
Yeah.
And they've advertised and incentivized and all of the things you get for buying an electric vehicle. And, the story is one of their marketing execs took one of the electric Ford pickup trucks and I think drove from Detroit to St. Louis, and it took him 2 days.
See,
he had to stop and charge the battery all the time.
Right. And this is the thing. I think you and I might both agree that if an electric car was as efficient as a internal combustion engine, and by that I mean, first of all, we have increased the efficiencies of internal combustion engines like by an insane amount. It's really crazy what you can get in highway mileage. But the biggest thing for me that's preventing me from making that leap, not only is it new technology and everything else, but just the idea that whenever, like, I pulled over on the way to come see you, it was 5 minutes. I put the pump in my car. I ran inside, grabbed a drink, and when I came out, the pump was done, and I took off.
Right.
I mean, it was less than 5 minutes, and it's just not there with the new technology yet.
And the technology is still very young.
Yeah.
I think it was State Farm. It was State Farm, who's taken all the charging stations out.
Oh, they took them out. Wow.
Took them out.
Wow.
Yeah. They took their charging stations out of all their facilities because of the possibility of these batteries catching fire.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There's a house just down the road here that it wasn't a car battery. It was a drill batteries they left in a charger overnight, and it caught fire and it burned the garage and the house down.
Insurance giant State Farm says it's removing electric vehicle charging stations from its parking decks, citing safety concerns. This includes chargers at its Bloomington headquarters in the same community where EVs are manufactured. State Farm said in a statement they are doing so after consulting with its workplace safety team and fire department.
Yeah, and those fires are violent.
Well, you can't put them out.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we don't have that mass technology to put those fires out.
Yeah.
So there's things that have to happen. Science has to catch up with this. And we're pushing it, and it's not working. And it's costing a lot of money.
And one of the things you said that we'll get back to, that you've said in the past, but I'm also about to quote you. The problem is we have anti-business policies in place that discourage growth. I think the real problems are the cost of doing business in Illinois. It's very high. The barrier to entry is very high for people that want to start a business, and the cost of running a business is high. I think it could be fixed. It's just that Democrats have shown no desire. And I want to get back to that, but just to close out our conversation about energy, it's funny, I've had my sunset ruined by the windmills. What I used to have a beautiful sunset, now it looks like there's like red lights, like red light traffic off in the distance. And look, it would be one thing if it was actually producing like a significant amount of energy. I could be like, we've got compromise. That's power in my house type of thing. But that's not what I understand it to be. But
I just wanted to jump in because I just mentioned something about how this doesn't produce a significant amount of power for me, or at least that's not what I understand it to be. This is something that I admittedly didn't know how to begin to research, but it's something that I had heard secondhand. So basically what I had heard was that
all of the windmills that are down in mid and southern Illinois, that all of that energy is basically transported north, and none of it is used to power any of our houses down here. But I just did a quick Google search, and it says, and I believe that Dan Caulkins actually mentions something like this at some point during this interview. They say wind energy generated in southern and central Illinois is primarily integrated into the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator Grid, which serves most of Illinois outside the northern region. So that conflicts with what I understood. In contrast, and this is something that Dan Caulkins at least mentions once, northern Illinois is primarily served by the PJM interconnection grid. So, a little bit of a correction there on myself. I wanted to also clarify what exactly I meant, and in doing so, I fact-checked myself. So, let's get back to the episode.
Not to just make it about wind power, I just find it interesting that, like you say, we're pushing wind, we're pushing solar. Meanwhile, I'm under the impression that Illinois is one of the top producing states of nuclear power in the United States. Do you see us embracing that anymore? That was a lot of talk in the presidential election. Like, it seems like that's something we have going for us. We've already got the plants. And
Northern Illinois, so Illinois is divided in half, or not quite half, a third, 2/3 in the electric grid. We have MISO down here, which is Ameren, and PJM, which is up in northern Illinois. And that's where all the nuclear power plants are, except for one in our House district in Clinton.
Yep.
We have the Clinton nuclear power plant that's been in my House district now. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to represent that power plant. We used to have the term green. So I don't know what you want to call them, progressives, Democrats.
Yeah.
They all wanted green energy. We're going green. We're going to have green energy. Well, the nuclear industry said we're green. There's no emissions coming out of here. We're not polluting anything. And we're providing a tremendous amount of power, 365,
Right.
every day, all day long. So our base load is solid and we're green. Well, they didn't like that. So now when you talk about energy, it's renewable. So they changed their term to fit, what they want to talk about. And renewable energy is not reliable because the sun doesn't shine all day, every day. Today.
Wind doesn't blow every day.
And the wind doesn't blow every day.
Right.
So when they tell you that this patch of windmills produces, 1,000 bushel baskets of electricity, that's true. If all of them were turning all of the time, but they don't. They're about, I'm thinking there's like 40% efficient.
Yeah.
So they're only getting 40 bushel baskets of electricity if you kind of put it in that term. And the same with the solar panels. Now I have solar panels on a building. I've been on the energy committee for my 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see what the process was, what it took to put the panels up, what the industry was like. And I wasn't very impressed, but, we're sending electricity back to Ameren, and it'll probably take me 20 years to recoup my investment.
Yeah.
And the government paid for almost half of it, which is kind of weird. But it's not a reliable load. It doesn't, those solar panels don't generate any electricity at night.
Right.
And if the wind's not blowing, what's keeping your lights on?
And I think the slap in the face for me is, again, if you're somebody who proposed to have these beliefs and you really, let's get some solar panels, let's get some windmills. What happens to that material when the life cycle is over?
Well,
and they just throw it into a thing. It's like,
put it in a landfill.
yeah. And it's like, man,
Well, that's what happened. I mean, that is the issue that we've faced here in central Illinois with the windmills. And my advice, and people ask me about, signing contracts. I go, The one thing that you need to make sure you have is a decommissioning part of that contract. These companies need to put up a bond that when these solar panels quit or become obsolete, or when they're done, when that windmill breaks down and doesn't get repaired, that there's some way for you, not the government, not the county government, not the farmer, but there's some way that company is going to pay for the decommissioning of those windmills and solar panels. Absolutely necessary. Now, you'll never get that big chunk of steel out of the ground.
Right.
That's huge. But you can certainly, take down the tower and dispose of it, and somebody's going to have to.
Yeah.
When it quits working. The same with solar panels. They have a life cycle. And as technology changes, new panels become more efficient, and these panels it's just the natural way things work.
Right.
There needs to be a way to pay for the decommission, just like in a nuclear power plant. This power plant in Clinton, they have a library, an absolute library full of regulations and instructions and anything and everything imaginable if they were ever to shut that power plant down, how they did it. And there's a fund for it. And it's all there, pre-planned and ready to go if that were ever to happen. Well, we don't have anything like that for wind or solar. And it's going to happen. And it may be 10 years, it may be 20 years, but you'll drive by this solar field that's across the street from me, and it'll just be sitting there abandoned.
Yeah.
It'll just be because nobody is willing to pay to take it down and restore that land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a frustrating one for me, just because it's not that I think both of us look at what seem to be the goals of those policies and we admire it. We're like, hey, let's do better by our earth, stuff like that. But you'd be short-sighted not to admit that these aren't the way. These certain policy efforts are not the way to go in that regard.
Well, and what's happened is that when we have used this ideological bent, of the Illinois Democrats, particularly our governor, we've created a shortage. We have a shortage of electric generation in Illinois. We used to export electricity not too long ago. We were essentially selling electricity. Well, now we're buying almost half of the electricity that we need. Northern Illinois is okay. They're going to end up with a problem, but right now they make enough electricity because of the nuke plants. We only have one nuke plant.
Right.
And we don't make enough electricity in our distribution network. So the answer is we have to buy it. Well, when you buy electricity from other states, it has to get shipped here somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our grid isn't set up. We were exporting some electricity. Now we're importing a massive amount of electricity. So the extension cord isn't sufficient.
Yeah.
We need to put like a big cable, put it in layman's terms, to Indiana and Iowa or Kentucky. Well, guess who pays for that? You and I. It's on our bill. It's going to be that billions of dollars, at least $1 billion at the current rate, to build out the infrastructure. That's what they say. Well, we're going to build out the infrastructure. Well, the reason we have to build out the infrastructure is we have to extend our extension cord to bring in this electricity that we don't make anymore. So instead of making that electricity in Illinois and using the grid that we have, and we should upgrade it. I mean, it needs to be, you always want to keep current. But the amount of money that Ameren is going to spend to upgrade the grid, because we don't make electricity in Illinois, that further creates our costs of reliable electricity. It makes it unattractive for businesses. It drives people out, particularly retired people on fixed income. They can't afford, their electric bills or utility bills as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, all of these problems we talked about, workman's comp and unemployment insurance, these are all man-made problems. These aren't natural disasters. We don't have, calamities.
Right.
that are driving people out of Illinois.
Right.
These are all man-made problems. And what man-made, man can unmake. But there's no desire to do so. I mean, people in Springfield will continue to pile regulations and taxes and burdens on the population of the state. People vote with their feet. Businesses, what you don't know is what didn't come here.
Yeah.
Because businesses don't wake up today and say, I think we're going to build a plant in Illinois in July.
Mm-hmm.
No, 5 years. It's a 5-year plan. When they start looking at a place to increase their production or move their production or modernize their production. It's a long-term plan. And they just fly right over Illinois for the most part. Well, they'll stop, and how big a check is the governor willing to write?
Right.
You're going to give us $500 million to build a battery plant in Manteno. Seems like a pretty good deal. That offsets. That's what it takes. We wouldn't need that if we were competitive. We wouldn't need to be spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars to attract businesses to Illinois if we were competitive.
Yeah.
It's a great state. We're in the middle of the country. Railroads, airports, highways, Mississippi, the river, the Ohio. This state is blessed.
Right.
And we still have to bribe people to come here and do business.
Yeah. Seems like bribery is the Illinois way.
Well, now you want to segue to Madigan, I can tell.
Yeah. Well,
no, that's no Captain.
Well, I was going to think about that. Yeah. But I have a way to fit Madigan into this.
The word came out.
Yeah. No, hey, it's okay. I thought we were going to mention ComEd when we were talking about power, and I was going to say, oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's Northern Illinois. That's PJM. And I have a theory about that, and obviously the lawyers think differently. I think I don't think they bribed Madigan. I don't think they were the ones doing the bribing. I think Madigan and his people strong-armed them in order to pass favorable legislation. I think it started in Madigan's office or with his people and the Democrats.
Yeah.
And, I don't think ComEd went to them and said, look, we're going to, and they, rather than go to trial, they paid a $200 million fine. And what they did was wrong, and they knew it was wrong. They should never have gotten shaken down. As soon as they were, I think, put into that position, they should have gone to the feds and said, hey, I got this McLean guy or whoever, telling us that if we want to get our rates or we want to keep our nuclear power plants open, we need to hire this guy and we need to put this guy on our board. I think that was the deal. I really do. I think that because Madigan controlled the legislation and he controlled the people and he controlled who were lobbyists for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it started. And that's why he's on trial.
Yeah.
I don't think ComEd tried to bribe him.
Sure.
He was the speaker. I mean, he was the head of the Democrat Party in Illinois. He had hundreds of millions of dollars and campaign funds, scattered around the state. And he had supermajority in the House. You're not bribing him.
Yeah.
You're not going to bribe him. But he can certainly extract from you.
Right. Are things any different today in Springfield?
Oh, you mean as far as how things work?
Yeah, that is really my question, because I read that
they're not any different. It's still, the lobbyists have a lot of power in Springfield for the most part. I mean, I've had a bill that I wanted to take to a committee, and the committee chairman said, I'm not going to hear your bill until there's no opposition. Well, I'm sorry. If you're trying to change or improve or shake up a system or make something that may make some people unhappy by the change, but yet the committee chairman won't run that bill until you satisfy all the opponents. Well, if you satisfy all the opponents, i.e. the lobbyists, okay, then you don't have a bill. then you're not solving a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the industry that the lobbyist represents is the problem.
Right.
So until you satisfy them, he's not going to hear your bill. And obviously, if you go look and see who supports his reelection campaigns and whatnot, I would guess that that lobbying firm, that industry, is a supporter.
Do you think there's any appetite to get money out of politics? One of the things that I feel like was in the aftermath of Madigan was trying to repeal this revolving door law. This might go without saying, but I just said that people were trying to repeal a revolving door law, and what I meant to say was that Illinois was trying to institute a revolving door law. And in fact, I'm going to link a 9-minute podcast episode with Chicago Tribune political reporter Dan Petrella on Springfield's Morning News, where he talks about lobbyists and the push for lobbying reform in Illinois. It's part of a broader series of stories that the Chicago Tribune has been writing on the history of corruption in Illinois, which I will also link in the show notes because very relevant to this conversation. And if you're looking to learn more, these are great places to start. That episode that I just told you about with Chicago Tribune political reporter Dan Petrella talks about what Illinois' current revolving door law looks like and how easy it is to get around it. I definitely recommend checking it out. And there are some examples of people getting around the revolving door law in the context of cannabis in my mini documentary, which you can watch now at colememo.com/minidoc. Enjoy the rest of the episode. I can name off a few regulators that have circumvented that.
Mm-hmm.
People still get around it to this day. But it seemed like for a while there was an appetite for reform. Oh, we're going to clean up Springfield.
Yeah, when you get caught with your hand in a cookie jar, you always want to be contrite and, oh, yeah, we're going to change and I'll never do that again and we have to fix it. So then it goes away.
Yeah.
It goes away as soon as the lights are turned off and somebody else's problem, and there's no appetite for that. I mean, it's a culture. It's a very corrupt culture in Springfield.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, my opinion. It's a good people. Lobbyists serve a purpose in a way. They represent an industry. And when there's legislation or, things that are happening that affect that industry, that they should be talking. They're trying to sell their position or informing those that are going to make these kinds of decisions, the pros and cons. And there are good people that do that. The problem is that when the system is controlled by a lobbyist or a group, that's where things get sideways, and that's where you go to the money. I don't know how you ever take it out. I mean, the First Amendment, people have a right. Who's to say that Caterpillar or ADM doesn't have the right to support the people that run for office that are friendly to their cause, or the hospital, or, you could name it, automobile dealers, or the nuclear power industry, or the coal industry, or the farmers, or who, we have people that, want their voice heard. They're members in the Farm Bureau or whatever, the coal industry or the natural gas, you have that. But when it gets to the point where that lobbying organization controls the flow of legislation, I think is where you have a problem. And the way they control the legislation, obviously, is through donations and,
Right, through campaign contributions. I would even say sometimes planning stories in the media just around legislation time to be like, point, oh, look what this would be so crazy. I've also heard that like part of the art of lobbying because it is a business,
It
is you like get something close to passing, maybe like a few times, like you like tease people. It's like, oh, we were that close. We just needed to get that one more vote. I promise you, if you retain me for another contract, we'll get it across the line.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't experienced that. Maybe, I mean, that's your deal. I don't know.
What do you think about the idea of like publicly funded campaigns to like, so it's like everybody has the same campaign fund so that nobody has a larger fund than
So
another?
you're talking about publicly funded.
Yeah, sorry. I may have botched my question there.
No, but that's what you're talking about. So let me tell you a story about a guy in New York City that ran for city council.
Okay.
Okay. So New York City has a deal where if you raise small donations, they like double or triple match it to incentivize people to go to their constituents, and $50, $100, $250, smaller donations. And you aggregate that, and then you go to the city and you show them your campaign donations, and they write you a check for whatever their share is. It's, so if you raise 50,000, they'll give you 150. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
So this guy runs for city council, and he goes out and he writes down a bunch of people's names, and he writes down how much money they gave him. Those people have no idea who he is or what he did, but he was able to take that list of people and a bank statement. He probably put the money in himself. I mean, why wouldn't you when you're going to get 3 times your return?
Yeah.
And goes in and he gets like $150,000 from the city to run for city council. And that's all he does. He doesn't run. He doesn't do anything. He just collects some money, puts his name on the ballot, goes out and gets his petition signed, and gets on the ballot, and then goes in and collects money. He doesn't campaign. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't get elected. He keeps the money, spends it on whatever, office space and clothes, cars, who knows what. So there's a real problem in how the system can be abused.
Gotcha.
And I mean, I know that's just one guy in New York City, but that's a prominent, here's what's wrong.
Yeah.
How do you police it? How do you, and they police it because of public interest group. Said, well, this guy's run for the city council like every 2 years for the last 6 years or 8 years. And he gets like 30 votes. He gets nothing. Nobody knows who he is. There's no advertising. Nobody answers the phone. Right. And so they start looking at his donors, and they walk up and they say, Dan, Bob Smith has listed you down as a donor for $150 through his city council campaign. But he lost. How do you feel about that? And the guy at the door says, who? I don't know anybody running for city council. I don't have any money. I don't donate to political things. And they went from person to all down the list of donors. And almost all of them were fictitious.
Wow.
Yeah. But he gamed the system. He figured it out.
Yeah. It just seems, it sucks because it seems like everybody agrees that this is an issue at every level.
Well, it is. But how do you tell somebody in the Chicago media market that you're going to have to run a campaign for $150,000, but you come down here in Central Illinois and you have $150,000, and the cost of rent, the cost of TV, the cost of radio is substantially less. And so I don't know how you would ever balance that out.
I understand.
But
yeah,
we can go to how do you abuse that system? And Governor Pritzker is absolutely guilty of that, as we did here in my court case.
Yeah.
When there's a limit, $500,000 limit.
Right.
An individual can contribute. Now, how many individuals can contribute $500,000 to a political campaign, let alone an Illinois Supreme Court justice?
Right.
Or somebody running to be on the Illinois. How many people could write a $500,000 check? I mean, that's the threshold maximum.
Right.
500,000. Not only did he do it, but he did it twice.
Right.
So, but it didn't come from him. One came from him, and one came from another fund. So it was all.
It's funny. It's funny. It's like whose fund? His fund, but it's not from him.
Not from him.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem that we have is, we have campaign finance laws, but they're written in such a way that they can be abused.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing is that the disclosure is very strict in Illinois. The Illinois State Board of Elections, you have to disclose these campaign donations. I mean, anything $1,000 or more, you have to disclose them almost right away. And when you get closer to an election, you have to disclose them right away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, somebody finds out and turns you in, man, oh man, oh man, the financial penalty is severe.
Yeah.
And they don't mess around.
Yeah.
So that we have going for us. But the rest of it, there's no appetite to reform.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. It's like I put myself in their shoes, and it's like, why would you try to reform a system that's enriching you, ensuring that you win every time, and keeping everybody under you in line?
Right.
Because from what I understand, that's how it works. Like the speaker will get a lot of money, and then he can dole that out to those of his colleagues under him as long as they stay in line.
It's not just the Democrats that do that.
Right. And that's part of the problem, right?
It is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is.
Because, and I mean,
people, I guess that we're going to create a bill and a law, and we're going to introduce it, and you can only donate to individuals, to an individual campaign. Put a limit on it. And if you want to donate to the Republican Party or the Democrat Party of Illinois, there might be a higher limit, but it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
But if you want to donate to an individual, I can't remember what the maximum, I think in Illinois is 60. For me, I think it's like $6,800. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Now, you may want your employees, ADM or CAT or ComEd or I don't care, pick a company, John Deere, not picking on anybody. But if you wanted to walk around to your executives and say, hey, we're supporting Dan for reelection and I'm writing him a $6,000 check today, and it's probably a good idea. We should all chip in and everybody write a check.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody writes a check. But that gets disclosed because it also, on that disclosure, it says where these people work. Now, I get $26,000 checks from a company XYZ. All of a sudden, people know.
Yeah.
Well, okay. But they're individuals, their name, their address, their place of employment is all on the disclosure form.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to company XYZ giving $100,000 to the speaker or some entity that he controls, and then all of a sudden I get $60,000 in my campaign fund from him, not knowing where it came from. It's laundered.
Yeah.
They've laundered the money through that political action committee. So you don't know if that money came from company XYZ or company ABC or one individual.
Right.
So there should be campaign finance reform, but again, the Democrats don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
It works to their favor.
I think my last thought on it, and we'll transition to PICA, and then this maybe will wrap around like the first topic we ever discussed in Springfield was when I came to Springfield and talked to you all. I don't mean to speak for you all, but I think I got the sense that a lot of you found it refreshing that I wasn't a lobbyist,
right.
That I am just a person, because you guys have to deal with a lot of lobbyists or even just business people that come in and are like, here's this legislation, it's going to ruin my business. And it's very emotional charged and everything else. And obviously I had my reasons to show up. So it's not that I didn't have like personal things that I was concerned about, but what I found time and time again, and it wasn't only with your group that I spoke to, the Freedom Caucus, but even Democratic lawmakers, the first question is, who do you represent? What's your business? And I was like, oh no, I'm just Cole. And they'd like look up at me and be like I could see them go, You're just a person in Springfield?
You're here to talk about an issue. Yeah. You just came in. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't get enough of that.
And that's
I do
my
here.
point.
I get it here
Sure.
but I don't, they don't, if they come to Springfield, they come as a group.
Right.
So you get all of the folks that work for ASME, or you get all the folks that work in a nursing industry, or you get all the teachers, or you get, very, very seldom do you get somebody like yourself that walks in off the street and wants to know what the process is, or how do we change this?
Yeah.
How do we fix it?
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the problem. Now, how do we fix it? And I have an idea, but how do we work through this? This is a citizen, and it doesn't happen enough.
And I wanted to just say that too. Like, I'm like speaking through the third wall. I'm speaking at the camera right now. Like, go to Springfield if you're able to. It's remarkably easy to connect with your elected officials. So, you can also go to the local offices if you're not able to make it to Springfield, like you just mentioned. But try to go to Springfield if you can, because not only do I think lawmakers find it refreshing to talk to actual people, but I think that you'd be surprised at how much change you could possibly impact. Just
some
talking.
of the best legislation comes from your constituents, comes from just people you might see at a picnic or at dinner or at the grocery store.
Yeah,
I mean because those people are affected and impacted by the rules and the laws that we enact. And the unintended consequences obviously aren't, they didn't occur when we were passing that law or implementing that rule, until somebody stands up and says, the size of the letters on the side of my boat don't fit.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever. I mean, it could be anything, and you go, oh, really? Well, let's look into that.
Right.
Let's try to figure out how we can make this work better.
Right.
And it comes from people. I mean, that's where it comes from. Now, obviously, a lot of legislation comes from lobbying groups because they represent an industry that wants something. They want a change, or they want some advantage, or they want legislation, and that's the tough part. A lot of the legislation we see is protectionist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's, people don't want competition.
Right.
That's what's, the old saying, competition is good for business unless you own a business. And then you go, wait a minute, maybe I don't need all that competition.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's I think that is a good topic I want to close out with, because that's what we spoke about in Springfield, and it kind of goes back to our the quote that I read earlier where you said, I think our real problem are the cost of doing business and the barriers to entry. Like you said, sometimes that's a feature of a business, not a flaw.
Correct.
From the business perspective, right? But I wanted to talk about PICA. You had mentioned the Supreme Court case that I think you brought all the way to the Supreme Court. Can you give us a quick recap of what you did, and then where we stand today? Because there was a pretty exciting development.
Yeah. Well, there were two tracks.
Yeah.
So you had the federal Second Amendment track, and then you had the state court track.
Yeah.
And we took the state court track because everybody that took the Second Amendment to the state court were thrown out. The state courts didn't want to deal with Second Amendment. That's a federal thing. Go to Judge McGlynn, go down or go up north to the Northern District, but we're not hearing any Second Amendment cases.
Mm-hmm.
So we were looking at this, and so how do we attack this law in state court? And we came up with the 14th Amendment, which is equal protection. Now, we came up with equal protection because the law exempts certain categories of people from the law.
Right.
So if you're a police officer, a sheriff, a state police officer, a guard at the nuclear power plant, you have privileges, and your Second Amendment is protected.
Or if you were formerly employed in those as well, right? Not only currently, but formerly
I
employed.
think so.
Yeah.
But I couldn't.
Right.
Now, I had 22 years of military service. I probably have spent more time on a rifle range and a pistol range
mm-hmm.
than many of these people, particularly prison guards,
Yep.
they might qualify once a year. But I'm excluded.
Right.
I cannot buy or sell one of these guns, rifles, pistols, shotguns.
Right.
So that violates my rights under the 14th Amendment. Jerry Stocks and Brian Eck put together a pleading, and we went to the local court here in Macon County, the state court, the district court. And we filed our case, pled our case. Governor Pritzker, Kwame Raoul sent a lawyer in, and we filed our paperwork, and then we went before the judge, and we had our say, argued our case, and I don't know, a couple months later, the judge came out with a decision, and he said, Dan's right. His rights are violated. And not just his rights, but everybody's rights. And that's what we filed for, everybody, not just me. We filed for everybody in the state of Illinois. And we said our rights are being violated. Our 14th Amendment rights are being violated. And the judge agreed. Well, this is a constitutional, Illinois Constitution, under the Illinois 14th Amendment, not the federal, not
Oh, nice.
the U.S.
Yeah.
It's the Illinois Constitution. And so the only remedy for the governor then was to take this immediately to the Illinois Supreme Court. Because it's a constitutional issue, it didn't have to go to the appellate court to go to the Supreme Court. It went directly to the Supreme Court.
Gotcha.
So from the time that we won our case until the time that the Illinois Supreme Court issued a decision, that law was declared unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't seen anybody prosecuted under it. Even today, there's nobody that's been arrested for not registering. Now, we've been prevented from buying.
Right.
Because the state of Illinois also regulates FFLs.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to sell because the state will shut them down for doing it. But
only to that special class, though. I think that's
Right.
important.
Right.
Yes, they only sell.
so
that
we
special
went to
class.
the Illinois Supreme Court and argued our case. Well, there happens to be two judges just got elected on the most recent election after the remap that they said they wouldn't do, that Governor Pritzker had donated. We talked about it, the $1 million each, plus the speaker, plus the president of the Senate donated.
You're saying the speaker, the president of the Senate also donated to these campaigns?
Yes, for these campaigns.
Gotcha.
Plus the fact that these two ladies, when they were running for election to the Supreme Court, accepted the endorsement and publicly of these anti-Second Amendment groups, Moms Demand Action or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So they already had set themselves up as being against the Second Amendment rights, and that anything that came before them, they were not going to let that happen. Well, as the case would be, we lost. We had one Democrat, not because she liked our case, but she said that the law didn't go far enough. There should be no protected class. Nobody in Illinois, I don't care if you're a policeman, a prison guard, a state policeman, no one in Illinois should be able to buy these rifles, pistols, or shotguns. She said the law didn't go far enough. She didn't like the law because it had exclusions.
Wow.
And then the other two judges said that the law was passed unconstitutionally, it didn't get the 3 readings, and they kind of skirted the constitutionality of it, but we lost. So it was 4-3. Well, we didn't feel like we got a fair trial because two of those judges were already prejudiced against us.
Right.
So we took them to the United States Supreme Court, and we filed a case in the United States Supreme Court. There's, I don't know how many thousands of cases that get filed with the Supreme Court every year. And most of them, almost all of them, they don't even take them. They don't look at them even. They go, no, we're not looking at that. No, we're not looking at that. Well, they took ours and they scheduled it for a conference. So we actually got the justices, the United States Supreme Court justices, to read our case. They ultimately decided not to take it for a couple of reasons, but one of the big reasons is it involved the Illinois Supreme Court and corruption on the Illinois Supreme Court.
Mhm.
And at the time, there was a lot of hubbub going on about Justice Thomas and his
Gratuities.
little issues,
Yeah.
and Sotomayor and her book sales. And so the U.S. Supreme Court didn't feel comfortable shining the light on the Illinois Supreme Court, saying, you know, you guys are wrong. You should have recused yourself because you're biased because of all your political donations. And then all of a sudden the light gets focused back on them, and they're going, well, who are you?
Right.
Who are
Right.
you to say that?
Right.
And so they dodged it, but they did take it. They did read it, and then they decided they didn't want to hear it. But we got 2/3 of the way in, which is kind of a miraculous happening.
Yeah. Damn. That seems like an instance in where campaign finance like kind of
Yeah.
came back and bit you, you know? Like
So-
not on two levels.
Yeah.
You know?
So now I tell anybody that takes a court case, that has a case that goes to the Illinois Supreme Court against the government, against the state of Illinois, don't going in that you have two justices that are bought and paid for
Mhm.
by the governor and by the not only the executive branch, by the legislative branch. So the legislative branch, and particularly the executive branch, the governor, controls the judicial branch at the highest level, not necessarily below that, but at the highest level, because the other judges that sit on there, the other Democrats that sit on that court, they saw what happened to those two judges. And if they go against Pritzker, they vote, do something against the state of Illinois, are they going to get primaried?
Right.
Are they not going to have the backing when it's their turn to get reelected? Maybe I got to think about that. I mean, if somebody's willing to put $1 million into my campaign fund, I might be taking their phone call.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might be very, very cautious about how I treat them and their legislative agenda.
That's insane.
But the same thing happens in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
You know, Pritzker drops $50,000 checks into every state rep's campaign fund. I mean, and then, you know, the rest of it, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars come in from other arms of the Democrat Party
Mhm.
and special interest groups. I mean, what does that look like when your campaign is for the House of Representatives in Illinois? When you represent 10,000 people, and outside groups, not people in your district, but outside groups, are putting $1 million into your House race.
Right.
It's got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you feel like as a voter that you don't really hold any
You're not.
priority on their desk.
No.
Before we move on to what is going on today, and then what we can start to close with our final topics, you mentioned it didn't get a third reading. I think that's a really, really important point to explain for our listening audience.
Okay.
It's a product of gut and replace, right? The PICA Act.
Well, yes, that was the process, and it's also a couple of other bills. The Illinois Constitution requires a bill to be read 3 times on 3 different days. Now, you can read a bill at 6:00 at night and at 1:00 in the morning the next day. Satisfies the requirement.
Yeah.
But the Democrats were so bold, they didn't care. They didn't care. They'd run a bill. They'd suspend the rules, whatever. You can't suspend the Constitution. So when all of this happened, and it started out with the no cash bail thing, that was one of the complaints
Mhm.
about the no cash bail. But again, this is a state constitution. It's not a federal issue. It's a state issue. And yes, the Illinois Supreme Court recognized the fact that the no cash bail bill did not get read 3 times on 3 separate days. They made note of it, but they didn't rule in favor of the plaintiff
Despite
because it was against the government.
Yeah.
It was against Governor Pritzker. So they sidestepped the issue by saying, yes, we recognize that this is a problem and we direct the General Assembly to adhere to the Constitution in the future.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, don't rob any more banks. Okay. And you don't have to return the money.
Right.
It's okay. But just don't do it again. And to the credit of the Democrats, they adhered to that now. We are now getting bills read 3 times. Every bill. Every bill is read 3 times. Because we got away with the consent. We had a consent calendar, which means that they would put 30 bills in one basket and say, we're voting on House Bill 100 to 130.
Mhm.
And that was the 3rd reading. Well, we got away from that 2 years ago. The Freedom Caucus drove that issue. Said, no, because there's stuff in there you don't know. I mean, there's a bill in there, and if you vote for all of them, but if there's one in there, then you have to try to go back and correct the record. Well, the record never shows that you voted no or that you wanted to vote no on Bill 109.
Right.
It says that you voted yes on 100 to 130.
Right.
So we stopped that 2 years ago.
Gotcha.
So now every bill gets read 3 times. And like I said, like the budget bill, it got read at 10 o'clock at night and it got read again at 1 o'clock in the morning. But it's constitutionally satisfies the law.
Mm-hmm.
So we're better at it now.
So each reading has to take place on a different day?
Different day.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting to learn. Now, okay, the latest with PICA, this is big.
Okay. So Judge McGlynn heard the arguments and said, the plaintiffs here have a very good chance of succeeding. I'm going to put a stay on the enforcement of that bill until we can get through a trial. And then, of course, the governor and Kwame went to the appellate court and said, oh, no, this is dangerous. We can't have this. And the appellate court, being controlled by liberals, said, you're right. So we're going to override the judge's stay, Judge McGlynn's stay, and the law's in effect until after you have the trial. But we had the trial. Took a long time. Actually, 18, 19 months, I think.
Yeah.
From the time that the bill was signed until McGlynn's issuing of his orders. So they had the trial, paperwork, hearings, all the stuff that you do in a trial. He took everything under advisement and came to the same conclusion. The plaintiffs have a case. This law is unconstitutional, federally unconstitutional for everybody. It's totally unconstitutional, and the state of Illinois can no longer enforce it. However, we're going to give the state, because he knows that they're going to appeal, we're going to give the state 30 days. So they have until December 8th to file their appeal, and then the appellate court is going to have to decide to put a stay or not. And they most likely will put a stay.
Which means it will be in effect for a little bit longer?
Well, what will happen is if the appellate court says we are going to take the case, they don't have to take it. They can say, no, McGlynn did a great job, and we're not going to hear this.
And then it would just be done.
And then it's done.
Okay.
Or they can say, yes, we're going to take the case. We're going to let the state try to tell us what went wrong in McGlynn's court. They can't introduce new. You can't bring anything new to the appellate court. It has to be based on the court hearing, the trial. And if they think that they were mistreated at trial, or McGlynn misinterpreted what they said, or things that they filed, then that's where the appellate court comes in. And they will review the trial, the notes, McGlynn's findings, and they'll let everybody send in their appeal, and then they'll have a hearing, and then they'll decide, was McGlynn right or not? Now, they can just decide on their own that McGlynn's right and not take it. I doubt that'll happen. And they can also override McGlynn and say, we're going to put a stay on this ruling until we have a trial.
Mm.
So the law will be in effect until they can decide if McGlenn was right or not. That's another year and a half. The judicial system will grind on. We will be under an unconstitutional law. Other laws are being sent to the Supreme Court by the time, and our appellate court may drag their feet because they don't want to get overruled by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Sure, because there's
the
the
Maryland
California,
case, and
Maryland. Yeah.
There's other cases that are coming up. And if those cases are decided, then our appellate court is moot. Whatever they decide won't matter because the Supreme Court's already decided,
Mm-hmm.
and McGlenn will be upheld. His findings will be upheld, and the law will be dissolved.
Do you think that? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, that's what's going to. We said it. We said it when we were debating it on the House floor.
Well, didn't Governor Pritzker say there's a 30% chance that he would make it through the Supreme Court?
Then that's not. I mean, there wasn't even a 30%. It's just it is.
But to even say that seems to be him acknowledging
he admits that he signed into law an unconstitutional law.
Right.
He admitted it, and the people that passed it knew it. The people that voted for it knew it. But their attitude is the same attitude on other subjects. You don't like it, sue us. You can sue us if you don't like it. Well, yeah, so we're suing them with our money, and they're defending themselves with our money. Because it's the taxpayer money that's paying Kwame and all these lawyers. That's why I stood up on the House floor last week and said, stop this foolishness. Drop the appeal. It's not going anywhere.
And you're wasting our money.
You're wasting our money, and we should be going after criminals and guns. We should be taking that effort and going after these criminals that have guns. They don't have a FOID card. They don't have a concealed carry permit, obviously, and they're committing crimes with stolen guns. Those people should be locked up. That's the people we should be spending our resources on. Get them off the street. No. We're going to spend another millions and millions of dollars on an appeal to the, 7th District Court that no matter what will end up in the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court hasn't already decided. It's a total waste.
Gotcha. Speculation, obviously, but let's say it gets overturned. Do we destroy the database?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that something you would have to come to the floor and say, hey, there's this database of people that have signed up for this thing?
I think there'll be a lawsuit over that.
Okay.
I think that to ensure that it happened.
Yeah.
That's really another one of my disappointments is that the director, the Illinois State Police director, is a former county prosecutor. I mean, he was... he's a lawyer and he's prosecuted crimes, and he was, and then he got tapped to be the head of the Illinois department, the state police department. He's a former legislator, a former senator, state senator, Democrat state senator. And he knows that this law is unconstitutional. And instead of standing up to the governor and telling him that this law is unconstitutional and we can't enforce it, he sets up this registry and he does all this stuff, knowing it's unconstitutional. And that is, he's disrespected his oath of office. He's disrespected his duty to the court as a lawyer. And he's put this job as director of the Illinois State Police ahead of his own morals, his own better judgment. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's not good. And he's a nice guy.
Right.
I mean, I've had several conversations. The first conversation I had with him was about the FOID card, and they're not processing it. And they fixed it.
By the way, do you think when are we going to get rid of that?
It's in the courts. It's an Illinois court. I don't know what the Illinois courts will say. I don't know.
For folks that are listening from Illinois, we are the only state that requires that, right?
There's another state that may have some registration form. I don't know. But we are the only state that has the firearm owner's identification card.
Gotcha.
That you have to go through and get approval to purchase a firearm or ammunition.
Right. Now, the foundation of this, Dan, I think you would agree is, and I've heard you talk about this, it's the idea that, how about we use Chicago as an example? They have the strictest firearm policies in the nation, and I would argue that they have the most issues with firearms. And it obviously, maybe it goes without saying, it's not the firearms.
No.
I mean,
not.
it's
the
what
criminal.
it's the activity.
And
yeah.
it's the criminal activity. And you see it. And this is the argument, with my Democrat colleagues. What has this done? What has this law done? How many guns has this law kept off the streets? How
Right.
many guns?
Right.
It's none. How much violence, how much criminal activity has this law stopped?
It's also just like we've forgotten that, and we'll talk about this in a little bit too, but the concept of prohibition does not work.
Doesn't work.
And just to take it a step further, Dan, it's like, okay, yeah, now I can't buy a lower or an assembled rifle at an FFL, but you know what I can do? Buy a 3D printer.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
But
that's illegal in Illinois.
I understand
it's
it's
called
a
a ghost gun in Illinois.
I agree. I'm
And-
just saying that people that don't care about the
people
rules,
that don't care about the rules. No, I mean,
this isn't stopping anybody.
doesn't stop anybody.
Yeah.
And the police, the folks in Chicago, they know it. The folks that come in with truckloads of, a trunk load of guns
Yeah.
and selling guns to gangs and gang members.
Well,
And they're coming from all over the country.
right. Firearm policy has made me realize that how silly regulations can be sometimes, because what you can do is just keep moving the definition. So it's like, okay, an 80% lower requires a background check in Illinois. Okay, well, what if I just sell you the metal block that's not the 80% lower? You do the milling yourself. There's nothing stopping. You can buy springs. I mean, these are just common everyday things, and if you're trying to prohibit them, I'm sorry, but it's an exercise in futility.
It is. And we're neglecting the real criminals. I don't know how many these pistols are taken off the street, every day, every week, every month in Chicago. Where they
Switches.
turn them into fully automatic.
Yeah.
Federal crime, first of all.
Right.
But how many of these are prosecuted? How
Mhm.
many people are prosecuted for possessing a fully automatic pistol in Chicago, anywhere in Illinois? None. Very few. Unless they get caught because they shot up a crowd and the police happen to catch them. And even then, I don't think they're going. None of them are prosecuted for not having a FOID card.
Right.
None of them. And if they have the gun stuck in their waistband covered, none of them are prosecuted for not having a concealed carry permit. There aren't any of that.
Right.
And you know why? Because it's unconstitutional to prosecute them for that. They would be setting themselves up for a court case, just like the guy in Texas that had the red flag law. Got all the way to the Supreme Court because he was denied his constitutional rights because he had a red flag law. Well, this guy was a real threat to the community.
Right.
It is terrible. But there's another case coming like it. Due process. But with these, there's nobody. I would love to hear from somebody who's been prosecuted for not having a FOID card.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. And, one of the things that spoke to me, and this will help us transition to our last few topics, not that we both don't have, I think, a lot of respect and a cordial, maybe even relationship with law enforcement, but I did appreciate the fact that you took the special class argument, because I don't know if you realized when you did this, but you touched on a point that I think is, it's like a real mind melter for people on the left. On one hand, the left is very associated with being critical of law enforcement. Some of them say ACAB. Do you know what that means?
No.
No, you don't know what that means? All cops are bastards.
Oh.
Right? Just, a very paint with a broad brush statement. So on one hand, they're against the cops. They don't trust them and anything else. But on the other hand, they're supportive of PICA, which gives the cops those firearms that they're apparently so scared about.
Right.
So you're giving the people that you don't trust the
access.
guns that you're most scared of.
Yeah. Exclusive.
You know?
Exclusive access.
Right.
To buy, sell.
And I'm like, I don't know how they reconcile that.
They don't.
Right.
They don't.
Fair.
I mean, it's another ideology over reality. I'm sure many of them got campaign contributions from these special interest groups, Moms Demand Action in every town or whatever. I don't know. And I don't look at their filings.
Sure.
But, they got paid off. And again, you sell your conscience. And once you've sold it, it's like, once a policeman takes a bribe, he's going to take more.
Mm-hmm.
Once somebody steals something and gets away with it, they're going to keep stealing.
Yeah.
And we have people who are dependent, I guess, on special interest groups to keep them in office.
Yeah.
It's not enough that you control the map. It's not enough that your House district is gerrymandered to ensure that you or one of your party, and mine's the same way, the 88th is gerrymandered the same way for Republicans, is going to always hold that seat. And when you're in the supermajority or even in the majority, then, you're accorded certain favors.
Yeah.
Because you can actually affect what gets passed.
Yeah.
Your vote really does matter.
Well, before we move on, I just wanted to briefly thank you again for your time, but like seriously for what you do, because if you can't tell, I'm knowledgeable and passionate about a lot of these subjects, and it means a lot to know that we have somebody that's taking their personal time to do public service in the way that you're doing. So I just
Thank you.
wanted to thank you, and
I thank the people that have elected me, and I thank my wife for allowing me this privilege and being all in. 7 years ago when we decided to do this, she wasn't very happy, but we recognized as something I wanted to do, that I had something to offer. And her, at the end of the day, she said, you know what, if you're doing it, we're 100% into doing it. And she's been there every day for me and with me and at my side at parades and events and all the things that she's been involved in. That's why I think I owe her about 7 years of honeydew.
yeah,
Somebody says, so what are you going to do when you retire? And my answer is whatever she says, because I'm like 7 years behind.
yeah.
I've put her through this for 7 years.
Sounds like an awesome woman.
She's a great
And
woman.
you answered actually one of my last questions, so it sounds like you'll be doing whatever boss tells you in retirement.
Yeah,
huh?
that's what she said the other day. Somebody asked her, so what's Dan going to do when he retires? He said, well, first you're going to clean the basement.
Yep.
That's the first thing he's going to do.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly touch on mobile ID, and then we'll got one more topic and we'll get out of here. I just appreciated this is again in the spirit of not that I don't respect law enforcement. I have friends that have just gotten into law enforcement, family that are in law enforcement, but I really appreciated one of the points you made on mobile ID that I didn't think about. I was pretty supportive of the concept of mobile ID because there have been a few times, silly me, where I'm driving and I'm like, oh shit, I don't have my ID on me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, damn, I really hope if I do get pulled over that I'm going to have a little bit of flexibility to say, my name is Cole, here's how you look me up, and they'll give me the benefit of the doubt, I hope. And when I heard about mobile ID, I was like, well, maybe this will make it a little bit easier. I can show him my number.
Mm-hmm.
He can go back to the car. It's all good. I'm on my way. God forbid you get pulled over. But one of the things you pointed out that I'm aware of because of my friends in law enforcement is the idea that cable thing you talked about earlier. We have that with law enforcement. I believe it used to be called Pegasus. I don't know what it's called today,
Right.
but it's this idea that law enforcement can hook into your phone, bypass most security measures, and
Exactly.
get your information. And you had kind of voiced that as a concern because it's like, if I get pulled over and I say, hey, here's my ID, and he says, I'm going to take that back to my car.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
So
Because it's already open.
right.
Your phone's unlocked
Yeah.
because you're holding up your mobile ID.
Yeah.
It's already unlocked.
Yeah.
No need for a password.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's nothing that stops them from downloading everything in your phone in 2 minutes or less, or more, it depends. I mean,
And you asked that question. You said, "What stops them from doing this?" And he said something to the effect of, "What we have measures today," and nothing.
no.
So I will link the clip that I'm referring to, this interaction that I'm referring to. It's available to be streamed online, and I'll just clarify that based on that clip, it doesn't sound like your phone will be unlocked. I'll try to find an animation, like an iPhone animation that I can display on screen right now if I'm able to. But basically this works like it would based on how the representative describes it in the video that I'll link. It works like it would with Apple Wallet. So when you double tap your your power button when your phone is locked, you can get into your Apple Wallet. You do have to unlock to get into your Apple Wallet, but you're still not in your phone. So that's, I just wanted to clarify that part of it. However, I've talked to people in law enforcement that tell me that they basically have utilities, for lack of better words, that allow them to get into your phone, whether or not it's locked or unlocked. And that's the real concern here. That's the concern. It sounds like Representative Caulkins was worried about handing over an unlocked phone, or not even that he specifically was worried. As we talk about, it's really a matter of principle, valuing your privacy. Yeah, my point was that from what I understand, not that the government itself doesn't already have access to everything on our phone, but from what I've been led to believe, law enforcement can use different utilities, like I say, for lack of better words, to get into your phone, whether or not it is locked or unlocked. And that's my real concern when it comes to any sort of mobile ID requirement where you would actually have to hand over your phone. I'm all for showing you it on my phone, but handing over my phone to law enforcement, it's a completely different deal.
There's nothing that stops that.
Yeah. So it's like, on one hand, I'm supportive of the idea of being able to show that, but if it's going to require me to hand my personal device over, I don't hand my personal device over to my best of friends.
Sure.
So let alone
my wife is in mine all the time, but that's not the
well, yeah, same with my significant other.
But that's we are in a world that doesn't value our personal security. I mean, artificial intelligence is coming, and we've dealt with that poorly in protecting people's right to their image.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge problem. And I think we need to be very cautious and very cognizant of people's personal freedom and what they own. And you can't get into, I mean, that's why we have, our Constitution.
Yeah.
And no one can get in, no one can force you to incriminate yourself.
Yeah.
Fifth Amendment. And so handing over your phone is handing over everything.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that stuff is in databases all over anyway.
Sure.
But I have a Signal chat app that's not. I have pictures that aren't. They're not anywhere except on my phone or there's some in the cloud, I guess. But there's stuff that, nothing in my phone that I could care less, but there are people. It's the principle.
It is the principle. Yes. Thank you.
And once we start giving away our freedoms, our liberties, it never stops.
Right. And if somebody's thinking out there, well, I have nothing to hide, that's not the point. It's the principle.
We have to. And then somebody asked me, I get it all the time on the Second Amendment. Why do you think people need this, that, or the other? I go, it's because our right is protected under the Second Amendment to possess. And once you start taking away parts or picking apart our Constitution, our freedoms, not from man, our God-given rights, once you compromise on them, any of them, it is going to reflect on all of them.
Yeah, and I will just say, not to get us back to the topic of firearms, but just really quick, I think it is notable that it's crazy to me that ghost guns. I don't like calling them that. I call them homemade firearms, are illegal because I remember when there was one of those shootings a few years ago, and Dick's Sporting Goods announced they were no longer going to carry AR-15 style rifles. They would only carry like bolt action and stuff like that. And I remember people complaining, and me correcting them. They were saying, "This is bullshit. This is an infringement on my Second Amendment right." And I said, with all due respect, Dick's can choose what they want to and what not to sell. But I will say it's crazy to me that building because with that in mind, nobody has to sell guns, technically. So with that in mind, it's crazy to me that making your own firearm is illegal. It's like, but so how else are we supposed to get a firearm?
Right.
Well,
how do you repair? How do you maintain the operational safety of if you can't buy repair parts?
Right.
What do you do?
Right. So,
and when we look at the Supreme Court's decision, that's where most of the firearms came from. That's how we beat the British.
Yeah.
Homemade.
Right.
Guys were, making rifles and.
And if anything's fundamental to the Second Amendment right, I would say it's that. Yeah. There's nothing that says you can buy it from places. You have the right to bear arms, and so anyways,
That's good.
Yeah. To close out, Dan, do you remember what we talked about last time we were in Springfield?
I can't remember.
We were talking about sort of the issue of like cannabis and a hemp bill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was me, Representative Miller,
right,
and a room of other folks that I can't remember their names now, but when I looked up later, I was like, oh, that's him and that's him.
I think it was Adam Niemer and Blaine Willauer.
Yep.
And Chris and I. And I can't remember if there was anyone else in the room, but there's the founders of the Freedom Caucus.
I wasn't expecting to walk into a room of people. I was expecting to see Representative Miller. So I kind of had the floor, and I was explaining that, you'd mentioned that there hasn't been any gut and replace bills for like 2 years. This House Bill 4293.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh.
No, there's gut and replace bills.
Okay.
But we read them now 3 times on 3 separate days, rather than just taking a bill and sticking something in it and bringing it out.
Gotcha.
The process is, the gut and replace is still there.
Sure.
No, there's shell bills filed. The Speaker has his, and the Senate President has his, and the Minority Leader has theirs. There are shell bills out there.
Right. And this one was
this is, we file a bill that everybody should brush their teeth in the morning.
Yeah.
And it goes and it gets read into the record, and then it gets assigned to a committee, and then the executive committee will hear the bill, and it says everybody should brush their teeth after breakfast. And it goes 12-0, it passes. So there it is. Mm-hmm. It's been read. Then 4 months later, that bill is the budget bill. It's got $53 billion in it, and it's titled, Everybody Should Brush Their Teeth. And it's a budget bill.
Right.
Nothing to do with brushing your teeth.
And that's exactly what happened here.
And
yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
So, and now that makes me realize how that combined with the late night, early morning reading, mm-hmm. that's how you can ram something through. You just mm-hmm. made the light bulb go off. Mm-hmm. So yeah, similar case here. This was the Massage Therapy Act. It had nothing to do with drugs.
Right.
I mean, it had to do with physical massage therapy.
Right.
And then Leader Lightford took the bill, inserted language from the big cannabis industry about hemp.
Right.
Have you done a lot of research on that topic since we've last talked?
It hasn't really, no offense, but it hasn't come up. It hasn't been on our radar.
Sure.
Gosh, now that you remind me about it, it's a little embarrassing. But
no,
yeah,
it's okay, because the reason I was most excited to talk to you about it was because this is not meant to be disrespectful to the other representatives in the room, but when I brought up my concerns about the bill, there was like some laughter, and you backed me up. So I'll keep this brief. I did a bad job of retelling this story. I've told this story on the podcast and we end up going on a tangent, but I wanted to just take a very brief moment to sort of retell this story so that you get a better sense. And I really wish I would have clarified this for Representative Caulkins. He took it the way that it was intended. However, I felt I could have communicated the story better. So when I say that his fellow colleagues laughed at me, they weren't laughing at me about cannabis, I don't think. Basically, what I had said was, look, I know you may not be supportive of cannabis, but realize that if you vote for this hemp ban, it is a vote for big cannabis. And they kind of laughed at that idea. And that's where Dan backed me up and calmly explained to his colleagues that I was on the right track and that this was, in fact, protectionist legislation. So again, it seems like he ultimately did understand what I was trying to communicate and remembered what we were talking about. But for the sake of clarity, I wanted to make it a little bit more clear what had happened in that room. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
You were like, no, he's actually like onto something.
Right.
And you explained, so the way I had pitched it was, so first of all, President Trump signed the Farm Bill in 2018, which redefined what is hemp and created a lot of these products that you might hear about today.
Right.
Now, Lightford came up with a proposal on behalf of the cannabis industry that basically would, in the similar vein as what you were talking about with every other Illinois thing, raise the barriers to entry, cost of running the business,
you had to
licensing.
sell this stuff at a dispensary.
Right.
That's coming back now. It's a little slow.
Yeah. And so you...
Yeah, no, but it did, though. It was an anti-competitive bill that took things that are, they're not harmful. And in fact, it's a useful byproduct. Or product. I mean, people are growing hemp as a product.
Yeah.
And it has, I think, some benefits for controlling soil erosion and trying to appease the cannabis lobby.
Right.
By saying, well, you can't sell that cream or you can't sell this or you can't sell that unless you do it through a dispensary.
Through our stores.
Yeah, through our dispensary.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is typical. I mean, it's the typical play.
Yeah.
So who has the money? Yeah, the dispensaries.
Right. Right.
I mean, they can afford to hire a lobbyist and they can afford to go to Lightford and some other people and say, this is what we want.
Right. To your point, and maybe this pales in comparison to other industries, but I think
it's typical.
Tribune has tracked like $800,000 from the industry to our elected officials, and they just coincidentally support all the same policies.
Exactly. We have the same thing. I mean, that is in a small way the picture of what's wrong.
Yeah.
Now take it to the next level in drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And we have prescription benefit managers, PBMs, who are the middleman, who make huge amounts of money because they, for the most part, don't pass on the discounts to the small pharmacist. And so when you try to reform them and you try to help these small pharmacies, the PBMs are there with their huge checkbook, not just in Illinois, but in Congress as well.
Yeah.
And it makes regulating them, it makes making the system better for us as a consumer and protecting these local pharmacists who, I mean, provide a huge service in these small towns because they know drug interaction, they know side effects, they know their patients, and saying, well, you're on this drug as well, and you want to be careful with this, or you don't want to drive, or you this, that, or the other. These small town pharmacists provide a huge service. But when they're driven out of business because they don't get the same price as a Walgreens or CVS or whatever, they can't compete. And then what happens is these Walgreens and CVS go to mail order. You don't have to go to the pharmacy. You can just get your drugs through the mail. Now, not all drugs. But
sure.
So now the local pharmacist is cut out even more.
Right.
Because once you get your prescription filled and they say, okay, so this is on a 4-month renewal, sign up for all scripts or whatever it is. And a little envelope comes every 4 months or 6 months with a bottle of pills in it.
Yeah.
You'd have to go back, and your local pharmacist is completely cut out
Right.
until you run out. And Walgreens is closed.
Yeah.
And you call your local neighbor up that's a pharmacist and say, hey, I'm out of, I can't get my refill until Tuesday. Can you help me out? And the Sunday, and the guy goes down and opens up his pharmacy and takes care of you.
Right.
That's a real problem.
And there's parallels to what you just spoke about. Like with these new products, you can purchase it through traditional retail channels. So you can go to Benny's. Are you familiar with Benny's? They have the Benny's liquor store.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Well, we got one here.
Yeah, I use it as an example because they're all over the state. If you go in, they have a section for hemp-derived legal THC drinks.
Oh.
A lot of breweries and bars and restaurants are carrying them.
Yeah.
And you can also get them delivered directly to your door. So you don't have to go to the dispensary anymore. You start to see why the industry has a problem with this, right? And I'm just curious, as I said to you in that meeting, I don't get the sense, now things have changed thanks to Trump. I don't get the sense, though, that the Freedom Caucus is super like gung-ho about supporting individual freedoms with regard to cannabis. But do you think that would change with, Trump just endorsed cannabis legalization and rescheduling. So look, right now I'm going to be displaying on screen Trump's statements on cannabis. Do I actually believe that he meant any of these things or that he even really cares about the issue of cannabis? No, I don't. But when you're talking to some of his supporters and people that, look to him for guidance on these topics, I don't figure that using his own words is necessarily a bad thing. And if you're reading the words on screen right now, I actually am not looking at them, even if they're displayed. I'm just going off the top of my head. He mentions that, possession should be legal. And I believe he says small amounts, which is funny because in the context of this post, the small amounts that he's referring to, I believe, were 3 ounces, which is what Florida was set to legalize. This measure that he's endorsing ultimately failed. He also points out, that he doesn't want it to smell everywhere. So it sounds like he wants, people to smoke cannabis where he would want them to smoke cigarettes or whatever. I'm making assumptions here. He also signifies support for rescheduling. So these are words, and whether or not they mean anything is one thing, but it's something to point to. So I just wanted to clarify in case anybody was like kind of laughing at me saying thanks to Trump and stuff like that. Wanted to add that context, what I'm referencing, and also just wanted to acknowledge that I am personally skeptical of the fact or the idea that Trump is going to reform cannabis policy at all.
Well, that'll be interesting to watch. And I think, Illinois just started this study group, some scientific organization up in Northern Illinois that's going to study the effects and causes and stuff. We'll see how unbiased that is. Because there are legitimate arguments on both on the other side that recreational cannabis is not good. It's not good. I understand, and I have through my mom, personal experience where THC can be helpful, can relieve pain, it can relieve anxiety, it can improve appetite on cancer patients. There are, I believe, legitimate uses for THC.
Sure.
Recreationally, we see problems. We go to Colorado where, there's just a problem. It's coming. I don't think we see it as bad in Illinois, but you go to Denver, get off the airport in Denver and drive through town, and it's just nothing but marijuana. Your car is just filled with smoke, or at least the odor.
Yeah.
But I think, like in Illinois, I think the Freedom Caucus, I think we're very focused on individual liberties and small business owners and, the working people. Where are we? On cannabis, I don't know. I mean, I'll certainly ask somebody tomorrow. We'll be together tomorrow in the meeting.
Yeah.
But it's not, I mean, it's just not, it's just like our conversation that day. That's reaction. But until there's a movement or an issue that is going to come before us. I mean, if Representative Buckner introduced the bill that said that you can sell these products, you don't have to sell these products in a dispensary, I'd sign on to it. I think we all would sign on to it. It's just that where I guess the priorities, is that something that's a priority of the General Assembly? I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm just saying I haven't heard anybody since then bring this issue up.
Yeah. To your point, I've not expected to hear it come up this veto session, and maybe not even the next, but I will say that
it could come up in the next session.
Yeah, and some bills have been introduced. One of them by House Representative Harper, I believe it's 5903. And the reason I like this bill is because there are valid critiques, I think, to this issue, especially as it stands today with like testing standards and everything else. And so this bill would require, where you want to write down the House Bill 5903. This bill would require testing, require labeling, require age gating, because technically right now this is just like a tomato based off of what Trump signed into law. This is a descheduled commodity.
Right.
So Illinois has the ability to add some structure to it, and I believe the feds have even encouraged that. And so what she's requiring is 21 plus for anything that's ingestible or smokable. In other words, the products that you may have
like
rightful
alcohol.
concerns, exactly like alcohol. But then the testing and labeling is something that's interesting, because if the testing and labeling is not accurate, what this bill gives the state of Illinois to do is leverage the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, just like we do with any other consumable product, and deal with them that way, right? Deal with bad actors that way. And I just think it's a solution, because as we established earlier, even with firearms, like prohibition just doesn't work. That's the story of alcohol, right? And to your point, even though, as you can tell, I'm also passionate about this issue, I've had one of the leading groups that lobbies against legalization on my show several times. I tend to agree with you that it's not a panacea. It's not harmless. I do agree that there are harms. What I think, though, is that those harms will go the same way as alcohol and tobacco, where you've seen rates of usage fall through public health campaigns that say
plus the novelty wears off.
Exactly.
I mean,
but I think as you legalize it, just to quickly round out this point, you'll be able to have more data to point to be like, look what happened to this person. They did, Yeah. Whereas in the past, when everybody was quiet about it, you could make generalized statements about stoners, but again, without data to back it up.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, I watched Cheech and Chong, and I'm just telling you, it's dangerous. I mean,
yeah, he's been on my show in the past. Tommy Chong. Yeah. Interesting guy.
Fascinating guy. Really very smart.
Yeah.
He is.
He is
smart.
And when I met him, I thought he was going to be like the "What's up, man?" And he's totally like straight and
very smart guy.
But yeah, anyways, just to close, I ask you about this question because, as somebody who tends to lean right in many ways, like I've always just found myself frustrated up until this election when Trump said, hey, he indicated that, we should regulate cannabis and it shouldn't be smoked in public. To your point of it smelling everywhere, that's another thing where it's like, if you're going to smoke it, you should smoke it where cigarettes are smoked, and those places are coming few and far between. Right. So it's like, I feel like some of these valid issues you're pointing out are getting addressed. I just wonder how we move forward with this, because just like I say, to wrap up, it seems like this is federally legal. Meanwhile, the state program we made is federally illegal.
Federal Trump state.
Yeah.
Federal law, Trump. This is, the Second Amendment. I don't care. Federal law trumps state law.
Right.
The state, and this is how much time you want to be here. I mean, this is the fallacy of Governor Pritzker standing up and trying to bully the federal government.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here to take care of my people, and you come for us, but you got to go through me, and all that bravado. No.
Yeah.
No. And all these, you want to get really controversial. I mean, I think it could be anarchy. I think he's saying that Illinois is like South Carolina prior to the Civil War. By golly, we're not going to comply with your laws. We're not going to do what you say, and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. I'm the governor of Illinois. That's anarchy. Can't have that. And that's kind of an extreme point, maybe. But the real point is that the federal government, the state of Illinois, depends on the federal government for a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. And if you want to cut yourself off, you want to cut the state of Illinois off from the federal government, this state, the people of this state will suffer.
Right.
The people of the state. Governor Pritzker won't suffer. Now, he's got a big estate down in Florida and whatever, and he can fly everywhere, do whatever he wants to do. He's not going to be affected.
Mm-hmm.
But the people of the state will be affected. If the federal government decides they're going to take up his challenge and go, okay, we'll prove to you, you'll either comply with the law of the land or you're on your own.
Right.
And trust me, we can't afford to be on our own.
Yeah.
We can't. We're already looking at a $3 billion, this year's not even balanced. I mean, we've got state agencies scrambling around trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills from now to the end of June.
Yeah.
Come next year, it's worse because it's known. You can't hide it anymore. The last 5 years, they've been able to hide it with COVID money, raise taxes. They raised taxes of almost $1 billion this year on businesses. Can't do that. You can't keep doing it.
Right.
It's done. They're going to be $3 billion short next year and the year after, and eventually it comes to $5 billion. We're headed to a huge deficit spending, and we don't have the money. I mean, we can't print it.
Right.
And we won't be able to borrow it. Who's going to lend money to Illinois? I mean, we're $140 billion upside down on our pension plans and help promise, benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to keep going in more debt on your daily credit card? You want to just keep running up the credit card, think of somebody,
Right.
Yeah. So you want to really take on the federal government for what? On what subject?
Exactly.
People that aren't here legally? Criminals? Even LaShawn Ford said, we probably ought to look at this. We probably ought to reconsider our position with ICE. We've got these criminals running around, the gangs in Chicago. They need to go. Well, look at the election. I mean, you see unprecedented support for President Trump.
Yeah.
So, fine, Governor Pritzker, stand up and try to bully. You're the governor of one state and your family's worth several $1 billion. That's fine. You're going up against a guy who's a head of 50 states and controls $1 trillion economy and the strings and the power of the government. And, they just say, we're not granting you the waivers anymore.
Yeah.
We're not funding that anymore. You're on your own. You want to do that? You go do it on your own because we've been giving you leeway.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal government has given us several waivers on different programs, social service and education, because their grant money is for certain things.
Yeah.
But you can get a waiver. Well, we've applied for lots of waivers. And when those waivers end, those funds are going to be spent the way they're intended. And the federal government, because you've already said you're going to try to bully them, they're going to come in here and monitor and audit.
Right.
And when that money isn't spent, they're going to cut you off.
Right.
And it's not properly accounted for, or if it's not spent for exactly what it was meant to be spent for, you're done.
Yeah.
And once that happens, the state, people will have to leave. they'll have to leave. They couldn't afford to live here.
Yeah.
It'd be impossible.
And it's just crazy how, again, this issue pervades every industry, every issue it seems we as Illinoisans deal with. And again, just on this last issue we're discussing, the reason I think it's so personal for me is, yes, I've found companies that I like that make products that I like. And yes, they're afraid of what this legislation could mean for them because it would shut them down.
These are all small businesses.
They are
family owned, run. Maybe 3 or 4 people have come together to do something. They found a niche.
Yeah.
And that, those are the businesses we should be promoting. Those are the people that we should be lifting up, not beating down for some special interest because they've got $800 million to spend.
Well, the most messed up thing about it, to keep our language clean, is that the answer to these, so the bill that I was requesting the Freedom Caucus just not to vote on, the repercussion for operating without a license would have been $10,000 daily fees plus all criminal penalties. And you have to consider that on Friday, that speech you just referenced with Governor Pritzker, one of the first things he says is that we've stopped these policies, the war on drug policies. And it's like, no, that's the primary enforcement mechanism for people that don't have a license. And by the way, you don't let anybody get licenses.
No.
So it's like you're continuing that very war on drugs.
No, we can continue. The Black Caucus was sold a bill of goods. They were sold a bill of goods when they legalized recreational cannabis. When they went to recreational cannabis, that whole thing was, we're going to set money aside. We're going to have community dispensaries and minority ownership and all this and that. No, not even the people driving the stuff around. They've got.
You just saw the lawsuit? Yeah.
Got a beef with the governor.
We're talking with that lawyer tomorrow.
Good.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying they continue to give their allegiance to a governor and a group of people that will tell them what they want to hear. It's the same thing with CEJA. There are no green jobs. These folks aren't down here putting up windmills or solar panels. The job training programs are non-existent or totally ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
None of that stuff that they were told was going to happen if they voted for these policies that have been harmful to their communities has come to fruition.
Right.
And yet they continue to fall in line.
The Chicago Tribune reported that arrests continue in Chicago, predominantly in areas without dispensaries. Just so happens those are the same communities that have always borne the brunt. The University of Illinois backed up that research. And it's just, like I say, it's just crazy to me that the answer, because in other industries, this is the way that I look at it. There are, and I've talked to lawyers about this, there are other mechanisms of enforcement, like a business fine, but it's always handcuffs and how long you're going to jail. And it's like,
but yet the Democrats will fight you tooth and nail on criminal penalty enhancements.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make a crime more serious. It'll never happen. Well, you're enhancing the penalties, and we're not going to enhance the penalties. But it's okay to make a class 4 or class 3 felony for some business people.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. When things, I'm gonna get in trouble again, folks. It's okay. And I said this 2 years ago, after the last election for our governor, and all of our state officials and senators. Things obviously haven't gotten bad enough in Illinois. When things get bad enough, and that's coming, folks, it's coming. If it's 2025, it'll be here in 2026. Things are going to get bad. Our budget is unsustainable. Our programs, our social service programs are unsustainable. DCFS is a mess. And you go on. And things are going to get bad enough. It's a shame. It's really, I mean, I'm not leaving. We're here. I love this place. We got I mean, this is where we live. But people, you keep voting for the same people and expecting a different result, and you're not getting it. How many times do the Black Caucus have to be betrayed?
Right.
How many times? And they continue to support bad ideas. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not good.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having a conversation with me about cannabis, even though it doesn't sound like it's maybe something.
But it's a business. It is. It talks about the business climate in Illinois and how small businesses are taken advantage of, in regulations and taxes and.
And then what you said earlier, just to take it a step further, this is where I come in. The downstream effects, because the conversation is all about the big business and the small business and everything else, when it's like, who's going to those businesses?
Right.
What's their experience?
Right.
And that's what I came to you as, where I was like, look, I know that we have to do something, and I know that there are legislation like that I just told you about that will do something to address the valid concerns that people have. Like, there shouldn't be mislabeled products. You should know what you're taking. They should not be sold to kids. So, like, let's mandate that and put the force of the law behind that. But there's no reason to say, like, oh no, because you have to realize, and this is my last thought on this topic, it's just what you said earlier with a different topic. The reason they want to ban these, and this is from Governor Pritzker's Cannabis Regulation Oversight Office, Governor Pritzker himself, and others that actually have licenses, they say these products undercut us. In other words, they're not used to the competition.
Right.
And actually, that's how Illinois' market was set up, was it's a limited market to prevent competition.
Right.
So they've all of a sudden been exposed to this federally legal product, and they're wanting to take it back to this. It's interesting how this is an instance where federal law is ahead of state law.
Exactly.
And they're saying, but that competes with our profit motive.
Right.
Do our state program, which protects us. It's so like insane to see.
No, it is. And, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to address it.
Yeah.
I probably won't. In fact, I know I won't be there. If it comes up next spring, which would be a good thing, but I don't know. I'll check out 5903. I'll have that part of my conversation this week with the Freedom Caucus.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, we'll have to chat another time. I might reach out to other members of the Freedom Caucus, so maybe you can put in a friendly word for me. I hope you had fun today. Did you have a good time?
I had a great time.
Awesome. Well,
it's just good to see you again.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you. You said it was 6 years of service. Is that right?
6 years.
Thank you for your 6 years. I think it's noble of you to step down, even though you don't need to. I think it's honorable of you to just honor your word, pass the baton.
Yep.
And thank you again for spending so much time with me today.
No, it's a pleasure. Hope to see you again.
Yep. We'll see you on the next episode, folks. Take care.